because of exhausting of battery, and I think we are went on offline when I am proceeding to say about oral diet declarations. I will repeat again for the benefit of you all that apart from written declarations and declarations by gestures and signs, there is another species of declarations which is oral diet declarations. Now friends, oral diet declarations are more dangerous in the point of view of a defense advocate. It will be very difficult to dispel the oral diet declarations and to extricate the accused from the criminal trial. So normally when this is as a result of fee fabrication of oral diet declarations by the police, because since they did not find any prima facie evidence against the accused to connect him with the crime, they normally resorted to introduce oral diet declarations saying that the deceased prior to his death gave oral diet declarations to his relatives, wife, husband, etc., etc., etc. And on that basis, the police normally try to seek conviction of the accused. So oral declarations are very difficult to dispel, and oral diet declarations also form basis for conviction. So we have to be careful while dealing with the cases where oral diet declarations are there. The law on this aspect is very clear. The law says, in the shape of various judicial pronouncements, that the court should satisfy, before accepting the oral declarations, few important aspects. They are that the deceased was really in fit state of mind while making oral declaration. Secondly, there was really an oral declaration made before relatives, wife or family members as suggested by the prosecution, and whether such a physical fit state of mind is supported by medical evidence in the shape of notings made in the bedhead ticket, that is case sheets, and in the shape of evidence of a doctor who performed post-mortem examination, or in the shape of evidence of a duty doctor who attended on the patient while the patient was in the hospital. So friends, the oral diet declaration is also an important piece of evidence regarded as a diet declaration for basing convictions. So let us see few decisions to really understand what is the impact of oral diet declaration in the criminal trials. So I first take you to a decision reported in the AAR 2013 Supreme Court. AAR 2013 Supreme Court, page 542. AAR 2013 Supreme Court, page 542. In this case, the wife, father-in-law and relatives of the deceased rushed to the spot where the deceased was attacked, and by the time they reaches the spot, they found the deceased in a conscious state, and the deceased gave out the names of accused as his assailants. So this is the oral evidence spoken by the wife, father-in-law and the relatives before the trial court. The evidence given by them on oath is that immediately after the incident, they rushed to the place where the incident occurred, and they found the deceased in a conscious state of mind, and the deceased gave out the names of the accused as his assailants. So therefore, the prosecution tried to rely on this judgment and say that there is the oral declaration spoken by the family members, that is wife, father-in-law and relatives. Therefore, the accused is liable for punishment. Now, in that case, the oral diet declaration was upheld and admitted in evidence. More particularly, the defense counsel failed to cross-examine the doctor who conducted post-mortem examination with regard to the fitness of the state of mind of the declarant. So, having no other go left for further appreciation of diet declaration, the court held that declaration The oral diet declaration made before the wife, father-in-law and other relatives of the deceased who rushed to the spot, and ultimately the Supreme Court said that such oral declaration is admissible and reliable, and therefore the conviction found on such oral declaration cannot be set aside. That is what Supreme Court held in this case, AIR 2013 Supreme Court, page 542. And in another judgment reported in 2008 Part 4 Supreme Court cases, page 511. 2008 Part 4 Supreme Court cases, page 511. In this case, what happened? The declaration, the deceased gave a oral declaration before 4 witnesses in that particular case. They are PW4, PW6, PW8 and PW9. All of them have categorically stated before trial court that while the deceased was in the hospital, while the victim was in the hospital, they went to the victim and inquired about what happened. Then the victim has stated the persons responsible for her death and the reasons for her death and the circumstances resulting in her death. So they, basing on the oral declaration made before PW4, 6, 8 and 9, the conviction was rendered by the court, and ultimately when the matter reached the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court has held that the dying declaration, the oral dying declaration made before these 4 witnesses, they are PW4, PW6, PW8 and PW9, is admissible in evidence. And in support of this oral evidence spoken by these 4 witnesses, there is also other evidence corroborating the oral declaration spoken by PW4, 6, 8 and 9 in the shape of bedhead ticket notings. In the bedhead ticket, a notice was made by the duty doctor that when the victim was brought to hospital, on his enquiry, the victim stated the names of assailants, which corroborates the version given by PW4, PW6, PW8 and PW9. Therefore, in view of that matter, the Supreme Court held that the dying declaration, the oral dying declaration spoken by PW4, PW6, PW8 and PW9 can be believed and trustworthy, and therefore conviction is rendered against the accused cannot be disturbed. That is what Supreme Court said in this case, reported in AIR 2008 Part 4 SEC, page 511. Now let us take another case where the oral dying declaration came up for consideration. That is, I will give you a peculiar example of a case wherein the deceased suffered 95% of burns. Deceased suffered 95% of burns, and she was immediately shifted to hospital where she was admitted. And you all know, in cases of extensive burns, the normal treatment that will be immediately given to a patient admitted with burn injuries, and that is more particularly with extensive burn injuries, what the doctors will do, they will first immediately apply sedatives and painkillers. Sedatives and painkillers. And you must remember that the result of applying sedatives and painkillers will make the patient drowsy, because of, normally as per medical jurisprudence, if sedatives and painkillers are administered to a patient, the patient will normally become drowsy and may become unable to speak. In normal circumstances, the patient will not be able to speak. So, the evidence of father and mother to the effect that after victim taken to hospital, they went to hospital and inquired with the deceased, and she told them that accused, the husband who is accused in this case, her mother-in-law, father-in-law and sister-in-law, all the 4 have poured kerosene on her and set her ablaze. That is what the oral declaration said to have been given by the deceased while in the hospital. So the father and mother gave evidence that deceased made a oral declaration before them. So in that case, it would become very difficult for a defense counsel to dispel that oral declaration. Now, what happened in that case is that in the case sheet summoned to the court on the application filed by the defense counsel, there is a noting in the case sheet 15 minutes after admission of the patient into the hospital, after allotting a bed to her in the burns ward. There is a noting in the case sheet that patient became unconscious. Patient became unconscious. And prior to that, sedatives and painkillers were injected to her. And thereafter, there is no further noting in the case sheet that as to when the patient became conscious. There was no further notice in the case sheet that when the patient became conscious. So when there is a definite evidence in the case sheet, a noting made by the duty doctor that at a particular time, that is nearly 20 minutes after the patient is admitted into the hospital, she became unconscious. So when there is no evidence as to when she regained conscious thereafter, and this particular piece of evidence, that is they rushed to the hospital and they inquired with the deceased, and deceased made a oral declaration. According to the father and mother, he is one and a half hour after she getting admitted into the hospital, and in that particular case, the deceased died in the night of that day when she was admitted into hospital. So the court held that there is any amount of doubt whether the victim was in a fit state of mind, and more particularly she was conscious and coherent to give a statement, oral declaration to the father and mother. So therefore, disbelieving on this ground the oral declaration, the court acquitted the accused. So to sum up my lecture today, I would just like to give a final judgment of Supreme Court, because in this case the Supreme Court has formulated the guidelines for the recording valid declarations and gave principles for proper appreciation of declarations in the criminal trials, and that judgment is reported in 2002 Supreme Court cases criminal, 2002 Supreme Court cases criminal, page 1491. Now here this case is decided by a bench consisting of 5 Supreme Court judges. I'll just read out what is the principles laid down in this case. They said that die declarations can be either oral or writing and signs and gestures, and there is no requirement of law that DD should be recorded only by magistrates, that if the testimony of magistrate that the declarant was fit state of mind, any medical evidence contrary it should be ignored, and the evidence of the magistrate need to be upheld. And a certificate by doctor is only a rule of caution and not mandatory about the fitness of the declarant. And when there is evidence of eyewitnesses to the effect that the declarant was fit and conscious, any medical evidence to the contrary has to be ignored. And when the prosecution evidence case is drastically differed in the die declaration, the die declaration has to be rejected. And when the court found that there are many infirmities in the die declaration, the die declaration has to be rejected. And when the court found that there is any amount of doubt with regard to the fitness of state of mind, so that it can be safely concluded that there is a declaration of deceased rather victim, in such cases also die declaration has to be discarded. So friends, this is the judgment wherein the entire principles of accusation is formulated by the Supreme Court, and this judgment can be taken as a torch bearer for every defense counsel to appreciate the cases where die declaration is involved. So with all this, I conclude my lecture, and I hope that I can able to give you proper lecture, and I thank every one of you for giving me a patient hearing, and I once again thank the Nyayavadi Parishad for giving me this opportunity to interact with you and to share my views with regard to the dye declarations and admissions in criminal law. And friends, now I proceed to answer a few questions posed by you, which are noted on a paper. And the first question that is posed by one friend of mine, Mohan Karur, president of Mayavadi Parishad. He posed a question that are there any exception to confessions before police not maintainable? So I have already said there is the exception that confession to police is found in section 27 of Indian Evidence Act, which makes the confession admissible in a given circumstances. That is, the consequent to information, that information should lead to the discovery of an incriminating article, then only such part of confession is made admissible in section 27. Otherwise, section 27 will not come into play. And then section 25 and 26 sway the field, and because confessions made before police and confession made to police while in police custody are not admissible. Apart from section 27, there is another sections also there. In TADA Act, the confession recorded by Superintendent of Police is admissible irrespective of the provision of section 27. Under TADA, there is a special enactment. There, the confession recorded by Superintendent of Police is admissible irrespective of the fact that there is the bar is contained under section 25 and section 26 of Indian Evidence Act. And apart from this, there is also another aspect where the confession, the protection provided under section 27 is not applicable. A peculiar circumstances where section 106 of Indian Evidence Act comes into play. Very few know what is the purport of section 106 of Evidence Act. Section 106 of Evidence Act deals with the burden of proof of a fact, especially within personal knowledge. The burden of proving a fact, especially within personal knowledge. So this section 106 is seldom used by judges in criminal trials. If this section is used in criminal trials, the burden of proving fact, onus of proof will be again thrown on the accused. 106 of Evidence Act says that when these facts are especially within the knowledge of the accused has to explain. I will give one simple example of a case where only wife and husband live in a house. And there are few houses around scattered here and there. And on the night before they go to sleep, they were found alive in their house by the neighboring householder. And on the morning, the husband went out and saying that his wife found dead in the house, and a case is booked against husband. Now here, if we apply section 25 and 26, any confession made by accused is inadmissible. But taking aid of section 106, what the courts have said, that in the peculiar circumstances of the case, since the wife and husband alone are in the house, and before going to bed the wife is alive, and on the next day morning if wife is found dead in the house, it is for the accused to explain the circumstances under which the wife has met the death. So this is 106 Evidence Act is also an exception to the general provision contained in section 25-26. And one more provision is there. Recently, by Act 25 of 2005, which came into force on 23rd June 2006, Section 311A was introduced by way of amending to Section 311. What is that Section 311A is? The Section 311A gives power to magistrate to direct any accused of a crime to give his specimen handwritings and fingerprints for comparison. By expert forensic science laboratory. Now this is quite against to the principles of testimonial protection, provided that testimonial compulsion, rather self-incrimination. guaranteed under the Article 20 subclass 3 of the Indian Constitution. Prior to amendment of section 311, introduction of section 311A, if a specimen handwritings or fingerprints of the accused are obtained during the investigation stage, prior to pre-trial stage, such opinions obtained on that was rendered to be invalid, inadmissible and irrelevant. But after the introduction of 311A, now the powers have been given to the magistrates to direct any accused of a crime to give specimen handwritings and fingerprints for sending of onward to the comparison by forensics laboratory. So therefore, these are the exceptions to the general provision contained in section 25, 26 and to the limited applicability of section 27 of Indian Evidence Act. I think I have clarified your question, and the next question that is posed by one of my friends, Sharat Kumar, is the comment on similarity between dying declaration and will. So, dying declaration and will, there are no similarities between these two. They operate in different sphere of fields. The dying declaration and proof of a will is altogether different. Why? Because in dying declaration has to be proved within the four corners of section 32(1) of Indian Evidence Act, whereas wills are proved with the aid of section 68 of Indian Evidence Act and section 69 of Indian Succession Act. To prove a will, at least out of two attesting witnesses, one attesting witness has to be examined, except where two attesting witnesses are dead. In such circumstances, there is different standard of proof of a will. So there is no similarity between a dying declaration and a will, though both are the amounts to declaration of a dead person. But dying declaration is a statement made by a person in expectation of death relating to explaining his cause of his death or circumstances resulting in his death. But whereas the will is not like that. Will is a different aspect. Will is a intention of a maker of the will that his property should be devolved on a particular person after his death. It is the will of the person who is later dead. So there is no comparison similarity between the dying declaration and the will. And another question posed by one of my friend Nagendra Raju, any citations for defense? So I have given citations for defense also. In so many judgments I have given both contra judgments also, where dying declaration is recorded by doctor is believed, where dying declaration recorded by doctor is disbelieved, where oral dying declarations are believed, where oral dying declarations are disbelieved. Because in oral declarations I have given judgments on both sides for prosecution as well as defense, and similarly I have given judgments recorded by magistrate also, because so normally a defense counsel, when dealing with a case involving dying declaration, has to be very careful. If it is a written declaration, the counsel has to find out whether the written declaration is properly recorded or not. If not properly recorded, what are the lacunas, and to what extent we can take advantage of those lacunas in relation to the judgments given by the Honorable Apex Court and the different high courts. And if the dying declaration is in the shape of a suicide note or death note, whether the death note is proved with the help of an expert opinion that the writings in the death note are that of the deceased. That is, the death note writings are in the handwriting of the deceased. Whether that point is proved by the prosecution or not. If they are not proved, let us take the advantage of that aspect. So, no case law is giving a definite decision where the dying declaration has to be rejected, where the dying declaration has to be accepted. It depends upon the facts of each case. So I have tried to give so many judgments. Because of want of time, I have not given another judgments. if time comes, if another opportunity is provided, I will definitely give detailed case law on both sides also. Because of the paucity of time, we are running out of time. Therefore, I tried to give as many judgments as I can. And another question that is posed by one Kalyan is, if a deceased gave complaint in police station and died, can that complaint considered as DD? How much evidentiary value? So I have already gave two decisions on this. That Ramchandra Reddy, K. Ramchandra Reddy versus Public Prosecutor, decision rendered by Honorable High Court of AP, wherein this particular fact is decided. The person lodging complaint and thereafter dies, and the FIR registered on the basis of the complaint lodged by such person who later died can be treated as a die declaration, and the FIR can be taken as a die declaration. In another judgment also, I have given judgment of Honorable Supreme Court, Rafiq versus State of UP, wherein the Honorable Supreme Court has clarified the legal position that the statements of a person recorded under Section 161 CRPC or the statement on the basis of which FIR is registered and later those persons die, such statements can be treated as a die declaration. This is what decided in State of Rafiq versus State of UP. So friends, I think I have cleared your doubts, and once again I thank for every one of you for patient hearing, and if there are any shortcomings in my lecture and if there is any disturbance in the live lecture, we do apologize for the same, and once again thank Nyayavadi Parishad for giving me this opportunity to interact with you, and in that process I also learned something because of the questions posed by you, and the learning process is a continuing process, and nobody is can expect that he knows everything in law, and I thank one and all for once again for giving me this opportunity, and I take leave of you.
Finish.